Hello, this is Ron Cheadle's instructional design presentation. My instructional plan was done for my two chemistry classes, my honors and college prep. The grade levels for these are actually a little bit different. My honors is 10th grade and my college prep is 11th grade. How we do honors and college prep at Red Lion is that if you're honors, you're just taking basically the same stuff, maybe a little bit more in depth depending on the class, a year earlier. What I noticed in this class was there was a lacking of math skills. So I identified a couple of goals, 3 to be exact. The first, students will be able to solve computations involving negative numbers, fractions, and decimals without the use of a calculator. Second, students will be able to solve single variable equations. Third, students will be able to manipulate numberless equations. In other words, just variables only. They won't have to have any numbers in there to solve the equation. Now the reason for these goals, first, all of these will be needed for later in the curriculum. When we get to the harder concepts in chemistry, if the math skills aren't there, the chemistry becomes much harder. Second, it's needed for SAT testing. Now, do some parts use a calculator? Sure. But if you're able to do this stuff quickly without one, well, it makes it a whole lot easier and you get through the test in a better amount of time, which will generally help you, especially when you get stuck on some of those harder ones. And lastly, helpful for life. Again, more just a convenience thing as far as doing things quickly without having to rush to a calculator. I know they're on their phones, but the more things you can do just in your head, the better. For the instructional strategy, now the one I put in my plan was peer-to-peer tutoring, which two people group up and one's the tutor, one's the tutee, and they work together teaching each other the material. One of the other instructional strategies that I would use is called station learning. In station learning, students are grouped into groups of 3 to 4 students, and then around my classroom I would have multiple different stations focusing on different parts of the goals that were mentioned above. Now, in each of these stations you'll be focusing on a particular aspect of the goal, and this will be done towards the end of the instructional plan when you have covered most of the different materials for each of the goals. So you'll have different problems at each one, and the students will be working together to solve the problems. And then after 5 to 10 minutes, this is all dependent upon the class, but after 5 to 10 minutes you usually rotate so that everybody can get at least some time at each of the stations. I find this very helpful to do a lot of problems, a lot of different problems with different people in a good amount of time. Assessments for this plan. There are 3 main ways that I assessed that were relatively objective. Now there's always the subjective one, which is the teacher assessment, which the teacher's walking around the classroom and observing, listening, and that's the subjective one because it's going to very much differ from person to person. But the objective assessments, first the pre-test, which would be 20 questions, 10 short answer, 10 multiple choice. Questions will all relate to the goals stated above. And this would be given at the beginning to assess where the students are so the educator knows where they need to start. The second assessment would be the quiz, or quizzes, depending on what's needed. This is the best way to assess the progress of the class midway through the process. Each quiz would be 5 questions max. I find it best to keep it quick and to the point for these type of things. It's just a quick, here, everybody take this, let's see where everybody's at. Sometimes you can do this in the form of, say, like classwork or homework. I find quizzes get them to focus a little bit more, but it is up to you. And lastly, you have your final assessment, which would be at the very end of the plan, once you've gotten through all the other stuff. This one would be 10 multiple choice, 20 short answer. You could also throw in some free responses as well if you would like. Questions, again, all relate to the goals stated above. This is given, again, at the end of the process. This will be one of your main ways to see how well your plan worked and how well your students are doing at the end of the plan. And so going with that, defining success, there's two forms. There's the objective, which is the test. How did they do? Did they pass? Did they fail? What parts did they pass? What parts did they fail? Do you need to go back and change anything? And then the subjective one, like I stated in the last one, is the educator's observations. Did they see anything different? Were there some holes that they may not have seen before or not realize that were there before? I think both of these are very important in defining the success of the plan itself. And then my takeaways. I had 3 main takeaways for this particular plan. I thought it was very much needed. I think that these math skills in chemistry are a much needed thing. It makes my job much more difficult if students come in with lower math skills, because then I have to take time to teach it. But if I can get them to learn it in the very beginning, it makes the end of the year much smoother. It's beneficial, not only just to me, but also to the students themselves. It gives them more confidence to do the stuff later in the year. It also just gives them more confidence in general, as we talked about with the SATs and just life itself. And then lastly, I think it's very efficient. What my plan outline is not overly tricky. You don't have to spend a lot of time, but you do have to spend a little bit of time. But it's very efficient trying to get to the different skills that are lacking, mainly in algebra. So that was my plan. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your day.